The Palestinian Authority has filed a complaint against Israel at the International Criminal Court over the fatalities suffered by Palestinians as they attempted to illegally invade across Israel's border. What is the International Criminal Court, and does it have the power to place Israel on trial? We'll talk about it today. When you say International Criminal Court, most people don't have a clue what you're really talking about. However, we all need to thoroughly understand it. It is one of the legs of world government that was very quietly installed way back in 1998, but it's gaining more power as time goes along. Let me give you a little bit of the background here. There's an article that appeared in the Jerusalem Post just yesterday. It's entitled, "Palestinian Authority Takes Israel to Task at ICC," which is for the International Criminal Court, over alleged war crimes. Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki met with International Criminal Court prosecutor Fatal bin Sauda at The Hague on Tuesday and said that further delay to decide on the alleged war crimes issues would allow Israel impunity. Maliki and the PA are accusing Israeli soldiers and officials of war crimes relating to the IDF's killing of over 100 Palestinians on the Gaza border during the crisis there over the last 6 weeks. The complaint also relates to the 10,000 new units in the West Bank and East Jerusalem that are part of the settlement enterprise and the 2014 Gaza war. Israel's foreign ministry hit back at the PA, saying it views the push for an International Criminal Court war crimes probe with great severity and as a cynical process with no legal basis. Now, let's pause just a moment. What are we talking about here? Over the last 6 weeks, the Palestinians from Gaza attempted to storm the border of Israel. Israel has a very powerful border fence. However, it, like any other fence, can be torn down unless it is defended, especially on the day that America opened its embassy in Jerusalem. They stormed the fence all day long. Now, Israel had a choice. Either let them tear down the fence and come barging into Israel to do whatever they wanted to do, or to defend Israel's border. Israel knew it had to defend its border. Yet, young men and women were told, if you go out there and storm this fence and tear it down, even if you're killed, you will be a martyr for Allah. And they teach them from the day they're born almost that if they're a martyr for Allah, they're assured of eternal life, plus they will enjoy the favor of 72 dark-eyed virgins as soon as they move into the afterlife. They believe all this, so they go rampaging in. Now, all of this was initiated by the Palestinians. They promoted it, they encouraged it, and now then they're filing charges against Israel because it happened. Ladies and gentlemen, it is ludicrous. It reminds me of the time when Yasser Arafat was at Camp David in the year 2000 with Ehud Barak, the Prime Minister of Israel, and also with Bill Clinton. When it came time to deal with the Temple Mount, Arafat looked at Clinton and said, there never was a temple on the Temple Mount. Clinton said, I must not have understood you because, of course, Jesus taught in the temple. And Arafat looked at him and said, there never was a temple in the Temple Mount or on the Temple Mount. And again, Clinton said, but all history tells us that there was a temple there. Arafat said there never was a temple on the Temple Mount. Right then, Clinton realized that he was not dealing with a person in touch with reality. He was dealing with a person that had embraced history rewritten. And that's one of the earmarks of Palestinians. They'll look you in the face, tell you a bold lie, and just keep repeating it with the belief that if they repeat it long enough and loud enough, people will buy into it. Sorry to say, the strategy has worked in many occasions. So here we are. The Palestinians plotted, planned this invasion of Israel, and then when they launch it, and Israel defends its border, resulting in the death of some of the young Palestinians. Now they want to go to the International Criminal Court and get the World Court to file charges against the nation of Israel. Let's finish this article so you can get a fuller understanding. The PA continues to exploit the ICC for problematic political purposes in place of acting to advance the diplomatic peace process, a ministry statement said. I want to tell you more about the criminal court in just a few minutes, so don't go away. But remember, you need to understand this because actually you can be tried before the International Criminal Court.
The End Time Prophecy Tour was the most wonderful tour. I would like to thank Irvin and Judy Baxter for a fabulous trip to Israel. I know it took much effort and planning to make it successful. What a tremendous time we all had, which warrants a great big thank you. You can't encapsulate it into words. You can't capture it with a photograph. You just have to experience Israel yourself. The Queen of Sheba said, "The half has not been told." I concur. What an awesome experience to visit the land of Bible history and see it come alive as you walk its paths. I shall be forever changed. Dale from Louisiana.
Join us October 25th through November 5th, 2018. You too can experience Israel with Irvin and Judy Baxter. Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 to sign up today.
If ever people need to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for End Time Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will really impact your life. End Time has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that End Time Magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME and get your subscription today.
Well, we're talking today about the effort of the Palestinian Authority to file charges against Israel at the International Criminal Court. I want you to hear some of the rest of the article. It continues to say, further, the foreign ministry said that it is preposterous that the Palestinians are doing this when they continue incitement to terror and to use women and children as human shields. Can you believe it? As camouflage for their violent attempts to harm the security of the citizens of Israel. Now remember, these are the people that spend $3 million per terror tunnel to go underneath the fence to allow their terrorist access into the heartland of Israel so that they can try to perpetrate crimes against Israel. This is what's going on. Israel is defending that fence. Since January of 2015, the International Criminal Court prosecutor has been exploring whether to open a full war crimes criminal probe against Israelis and Palestinians. Israel persistently claims that the ICC has no jurisdiction to deal with any of the issues since Israel is not a member of the International Criminal Court's Rome Statute, and since there is no state of Palestine fully recognized by the UN Security Council. Meanwhile, bin Sauda's office has already ruled in the past that Palestine is a state for her purposes based on its recognition by the UN General Assembly, and that any IDF actions taking place in Palestinian areas give the ICC jurisdiction regardless of whether Israel is a member of the statute or not. Practically speaking, Israel has been quietly engaging in dialogue with the ICC for years to convince it not to open a criminal probe based on the idea that Israel investigates its own alleged war crimes, which under the Rome Statute bars the ICC from getting involved. Let me just pause here to make sure we understand. In the ICC Constitution, it states that the purpose for this international court is to try crimes against humanity and other war crimes in cases where the state itself does not have a legitimate judicial system that can responsibly try these crimes. Well, Israel has a very extensive judicial system, and anytime there's something in question, they do investigate it. So now Israel is saying, according to your own constitution, you have no right to begin filing charges against us because we take care of our own business. The court was founded in 1998. Let me explain to you where this International Criminal Court came from. Since almost the founding of the United Nations, there has been a desire to establish a court system because if you have international law, but you have no court mechanism to enforce that international law, then it becomes nothing but a paper tiger. So there were many people who are avid believers in world government that had been agitating for the establishment of an international court system. I mean, after all, if you're going to have international law and then you're going to have an international executive, that's what the UN Security Council is, you're going to need to have an international judiciary in order to try people for violating the international law, the consequences of which then the UN Security Council could enforce. So there had been a lot of promotion toward an international judicial system or an international criminal court. However, it didn't happen for a long time. That is not until the United States had an international president by the name of Bill Clinton. Just do your research. He was an internationalist. He was a believer in one world government. Consequently, when he was speaking before the United Nations in 1997, he dropped the bomb. It is time for an international criminal court. Now, this had been pushed for many years by the World Federalist Association, and these people were avid promoters of a one world government. They believe that the only way to finally have peace on earth is to get rid of the nation state, to disarm all of the states, and to have one army on earth under the control of the United Nations. Believe it or not, the man who was called America's newsman for 30 years, Mr. Walter Cronkite, was a member of the World Federalist Association. As a matter of fact, in the year 2000, he was given the Norman Cousins Award for doing the most for the promotion of one world government. In accepting this prize, Walter Cronkite made the statement, the only way we're going to truly have peace is for the nations of the world to give up some of their sovereignty. Now, I want to pause right there. Is it possible to give up some of your sovereignty? Is that possible? You're either sovereign or you're not, because sovereign means there's no authority above you. You are independent. But once you give up any of your sovereignty, you actually have given up all of your sovereignty. Well, Mr. Cronkite was an avid advocate of one world government. And, well, he made some other amazing statements that we won't go into today. But we need to realize that this push toward world government has been long held and very powerful. And Bill Clinton made a speech at the United Nations in 1997. And then in 1998, the International Criminal Court was founded. Now, even though the U.S. was pushing it, it was hoped that in order for the International Criminal Court to charge anyone with an international crime or to place a person on trial, that those cases would be referred to the International Criminal Court by the UN Security Council. Well, if that had been the case, the U.S. would have had control over it because we have veto power at the UN Security Council. However, once they called the constitutional meeting to finalize all the conditions of the International Criminal Court, the nations of the world took the bit between their teeth and established an independent prosecutor that did not need to answer to the United Nations in any way, shape, or form. Well, once this happened, the United States of America realized that this would be a violation of sovereignty and that this court would have the power to actually charge a president of the United States with war crimes, crimes against humanity, or any other international crimes. So consequently, at the last moment, the United States decided not to sign on to the International Criminal Court. But then, at the very last moment, Clinton said, I think we will sign, and he did. However, when George W. Bush took the presidency, he withdrew our signature from the International Criminal Court. When he withdrew the U.S. signature, then Israel also withdrew its signature. All right, I want to make sure you understand that right now, the Palestinian Authority is attempting to get this world court to file charges against the nation of Israel. If that indeed happened, what would the consequences be? Well, first of all, if that happened, it would be possible that officials of Israel, if they're held responsible for actions of killing Palestinians when the Palestinians were trying to charge across their borders, if they're responsible, then a warrant could be issued for their arrest, and anyone who's a member of the International Criminal Court would be duty-bound as soon as they crossed into their border to arrest them and to deliver them to The Hague in Holland, to the headquarters for the International Criminal Court. Now, that's what would happen. For example, since Benjamin Netanyahu was the prime minister at the time, he could actually be charged with crimes against humanity. And therefore, if he ever decided to go to a nation that was a signatory to the International Criminal Court, they are obligated by their signature on the International Criminal Court to arrest him and send him straight to the International Criminal Court for trial. Now, I'm sure you can see what a keg of worms this would open, because can you imagine Israel's prime minister being arrested? Would Israel stand idly by? Would the Israeli Defense Forces say, well, that's the way it goes? Or would they immediately launch an invasion of the International Criminal Court? It would be grounds for an incredible war to break out. Consequently, that's what's involved here. When you begin to install world government, if there are powerful players that don't recognize that world government, for example, the United States and Israel, consequently, then where do you go with all this? That's the reason the International Criminal Court have hesitated for, 3 years now to file charges against Israel. Now, one more thing we need to understand. Hamas was not considered a nation. However, I think it was back in 2011, the Palestinians went before the UN Security Council attempting to become recognized as a nation and to become a member of the United Nations. However, the United States of America blocked it. Remember, we have veto power at the UN Security Council. So the next year, Mahmoud Abbas turns around and goes before the UN General Assembly, where the U.S. has no veto power. When they went before the UN General Assembly, the UN General Assembly always votes against Israel and for the Palestinians. So they voted overwhelmingly to recognize the Palestinians as a non-member state. Once they granted them recognition of statehood, that opened the door for the Palestinians to make application to belong to different international organizations, one of which was the International Criminal Court. Once they become a member of the International Criminal Court, that gives them the right to request charges be filed against anyone that they feel like has committed crimes against humanity, war crimes, or other crimes. So consequently, that's the reason that the Palestinian Authority was so diligent wanting to become a part of the International Criminal Court. That's where we stand right now. So world government keeps pushing up its ugly head. Now, Israel said, look, we're not a member of the International Criminal Court. You cannot file charges against us. But the reply is, but the Palestinians are members, and the territory that Israel took in the 1967 war, we believe still rightly belongs to the Palestinians. So any acts that are committed out there in those areas, we consider them as having been committed on Palestinian territory, and therefore Israel is indeed liable for charges being filed against her and all of her generals. I mean, already there's been some problems. For instance, there was an Israeli general that was flying to Great Britain. Now, someone had quietly gone to a British court, gotten a warrant for the arrest of this general. Well, Israel heard about it. They called the general while he was yet on the airplane and said, do not get off that plane, because when you do, they're going to arrest you. So the general stayed on the plane, returned back to Israel. The same thing happened to Tzipi Livni, who was foreign minister at the time of the 2014 conflict in Gaza. So she was being charged with crimes against humanity. She had been invited to give a speech in Great Britain. However, she ended up having to decline the speech because she found out there was a warrant issued for her arrest because of international war crimes. Now, that's the way the world government will work when it is fully implemented, and it's already working to a great extent right now. That's the reason that this particular issue is so important. Now, let me remind you, let's just say that the United States was involved in Syria or in some other nation, especially a nation that signed on to the International Criminal Court. As soon as that happens, now the International Criminal Court may want to file charges against the Secretary of State of the United States of America, or even against the President. This is a huge, slippery slope, and it could actually lead into a huge war, because is America going to stand idly by while some of her top officials are handcuffed and hauled away for trial before the International Criminal Court? Of course not. You say, well, I don't think that'll ever happen. Well, actually, it has already happened, because the president of Sudan, al-Bashir, he already has a warrant for his arrest, has had it since 2010. And the only way he avoids arrest is he doesn't go to any nation that is a signatory to the International Criminal Court. So he has evaded arrest all this time, but there is presently a warrant for the arrest of the president of Sudan. This shows you world government sees itself as being above the nations. All this comes together in the prophecies of the Bible, because the Bible prophesies there is going to be a one world government in the times just ahead. The Bible's very clear that there will be a world government that will maintain power and authority over all the earth. It's Revelation chapter number 13, verse 1 and 2. Also in Daniel chapter number 7, it talks about a world government that will devour the whole earth. Well, we already see the structure in place, and they're pushing it. However, the United States is too powerful right now, and we're blocking this from happening. But if we would get a new administration, such as the Obama administration or such as the Clinton administration, that would favor world government, then the protections would be gone and we could be sucked into this one world governmental system, something we do not want to happen. Now, in case you don't know much about this world government, you need to. We have a DVD out. It's called World Government Forming Now. It's one of the best things we've ever done. You need to see it. If you have not seen World Government Forming Now, pick up the phone and order your copy right now. The number to call, 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. We are approaching the culmination of the prophecies of the Bible. I cannot tell you today exactly where we are. All I know is there's a 7-year period that when it starts, we'll know exactly where we are. We may have 7 years and 6 months. We may have 8 years or 9 years. Can't tell you exactly, but you need to educate yourself. If you've not been through our 14-lesson series called Understanding the End Time, you need to go through it ASAP, immediately. So pick up the phone and call us. The number to call is 1-800-END-TIME, World Government Forming Now, and also the Understanding the End Time series. I hope you'll do it today. You can do that at endtime.com as well. Let me tell you today about our exciting Armageddon collection. What does the term Armageddon mean? Why is it so important in Bible prophecy in the last days? And what will happen between now and then? In our Armageddon collection, we cover subjects such as events of the final 7 years, the revealing of the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, and the world's greatest revival just ahead. In this special collection, you will receive the DVD, Seeds of Armageddon, November 29, 2012, our 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon, along with a PDF of our 7-year timeline and our informative DVD, First Step to Armageddon, December 23rd, 2016. All of this for your gift of $140 or more, plus the cost of shipping and handling. To order your Armageddon collection, go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
The End Time Prophecy Tour was the most wonderful tour. What an awesome experience to visit the land of Bible history and see it come alive as you walk its paths. I shall be forever changed. Dale from Louisiana.
Join us October 25th through November 5th, 2018. You too can experience Israel with Irvin and Judy Baxter. Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME to sign up today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
Before we come to the phones, there's a couple of other stories I want to point out to you that are really important. This article appeared just today in Israel National News. Israel and Hamas negotiating long-term ceasefire. Now, this one caught my attention because I was riding in a cab in Israel last week. My driver was an Arab driver. I was being careful what I said, but I simply asked him, do you think there's any chance of a peace deal being struck between Israel and the Palestinians? He said, Nope, not as long as the present leaders are in power. And he said, the first one that has to go is yours, Donald Trump. And then I said, well, if there's no chance of peace, who could make peace? He said, well, the one party that could would be Hamas. And it shocked me because Hamas is labeled a terrorist organization and it's proven to be just that. And so I was really amazed. Well, then I saw this article today that Israel and Hamas have been holding secret talks to come about, to accomplish a long-term ceasefire. Here's some of the story I want you to hear. According to Channel 10, efforts have been increased in recent days to achieve a long-term ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Now, Hamas does not believe that they can sign a peace agreement with Israel, but they do believe they can sign a long-term ceasefire up to 10 years. Wouldn't it be a twist of events if the United States found out that they could actually sign a deal with Hamas and get a peace treaty and perhaps let Abbas go by the wayside? Abbas has proven to be very elusive, and no matter what the offer is, eventually he finds an excuse not to agree. Now, according to the report, Israeli demands for a complete cessation of rocket fire from Gaza and the digging of tunnels and a solution to the issue of prisoners of war and missing in actions. In return, Israel will grant significant concessions at the crossings to Gaza, allowing the entry of projects and goods into the Gaza Strip. Egypt, which is also involved in the talks, will also ease the Rafah crossing. Wow. Okay, one more thing. This comes from Ankara, Turkey. Turkish President Erdogan said on Wednesday that the United Nations had collapsed in the face of events in Gaza where Israeli forces killed 60 Palestinian protesters on Monday. That Monday would be a week ago this last Monday, as the United States relocated its Israel embassy to Jerusalem. The events in Gaza have also sparked a diplomatic row between Turkey and Israel, with both countries expelling each other's senior diplomats on Tuesday. Erdogan, who described Monday's bloodshed as genocide earlier this week, said Turkey had launched initiatives to get the issue onto the UN General Assembly agenda. He said Ankara was pressing members of the UN Security Council to be more active. He said his chief of staff's office and foreign ministry were working to evacuate the injured from Gaza, and said that Turkey would stand by Palestine no matter what the price. Even if the whole world shuts their eyes, we will not allow Israeli cruelty. Now remember, he's talking about people who stormed the border and Israel had to shoot at them, first of all shooting over their heads, and when they wouldn't pay attention, when they barged right on, Israel was forced to shoot at them. Now, Erdogan went on to say, we will continue to be with our Palestinian siblings, not only with our hearts, but with all our resources. He said, we will never allow Jerusalem to be stolen by Israel. Now, what does that statement mean to you and to me? I'll tell you exactly what it means. The Bible prophesies that Turkey, Iran, and Russia will come down against Israel at the time of the Battle of Armageddon. So now we have Turkey taken, we could call it the Armageddon vow. We are never going to allow Israel to steal Jerusalem. Well, the Bible prophesies that Israel is going to keep control of Jerusalem. So when we read these things, it's like, if you know the prophecies of the Bible, they jump right off the page at you. Well, a lot on the table today, as always, because God's got his nose in all of our business. If you'd like to talk to me today, the number to call is 877-END-TIME. We will be taking your calls in the rest of the program. That's 877-363-8463. Or if you'd like to reach our operators, that number is 1-800-END-TIME. I want to say once again, if you have never been through the Understanding the End Time series, you need to do it. You can get your own copy. It's 14 one-hour DVDs. It will take you from 0 to 95 miles an hour, prophetically speaking. You go through this course, and I'll make you a promise. You'll know more about Bible prophecy. You'll understand more about it than 95% of the graduates from theological seminary. I'm serious. I've had many graduates from theological seminary hear me say that, and they've called to say, you are exactly right. So the course is called Understanding the End Time, 14 one-hour DVDs. Every person on the planet needs to go through that course right now, because we're walking straight through the halls of prophecy even as I speak to you today. I mean, America moving its embassy to Jerusalem is a direct fulfillment of prophecy. America aligning itself with Israel against the world government, and that's exactly what's happening. The United Nations, the European Union, all of them boycotted the dedication of the new embassy in Jerusalem because they are the one-worlders among us. However, the Bible prophesies that America will defend Israel against the one world government. That's what you saw a week ago Monday as the new American embassy was opened in Jerusalem. So all the prophecies are coming together. But for a fuller understanding, you really do need to order your own copy of Understanding the End Time. The Bible says concerning the end days, this is Daniel chapter 11, verse 33, they that understand among the people shall instruct many. And that's what this course is devoted to. It's to helping you to understand what's really going on. We're getting to the phones now, and Eric is calling from right here in Texas. Hello, Eric.
How you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good. You?
Doing fine, sir.
Thank you.
All right, I was just wondering, I always hear you mention Judeo-Christianity, and I was wondering because neither Judaism or Christianity have anything in common. Could you please explain why you say that?
Yeah, because Christianity is based on the Old Testament. We had the Old Testament before we had the New Testament. And many of the values of the Old Testament, the Bible says that the knowledge of sin comes by the law. The Ten Commandments define sin. However, the Ten Commandments could not save from sin, and they could not justify us from our sin. So they had the power to tell you what sin was, but they did not have the power to deliver you from sin. Then Jesus came, and he came here to provide a salvation that could enable us to fulfill the law, to live and keep the precepts of the law. So when we say Judeo-Christianity, we're talking about the knowledge of sin and moral values, and most of our laws are based on the Ten Commandments. As a matter of fact, there's a engraving in the Supreme Court of Moses with the Ten Commandments in his hand. So that means our laws are based on Judeo law, but it needs to go further than that. Without Christianity, the law merely becomes an enslaving power in our lives. That's the reason we refer to it as Judeo-Christianity.
Okay, I was just wondering again, because Judaism wasn't founded until 400 years after Christianity. That's why I was just wondering.
Well, all I know is in the Bible, there was a place called Judea, and there were two nations that originally were one nation. That was Israel, but after Solomon sinned, the kingdom was split. 10 tribes went with his opponent, Jeroboam. 2 tribes were left with his son, Rehoboam. And from that time on, throughout the Old Testament, there were 2 nations. There was Israel of the 10 tribes. There was Judea of the 2 tribes. Jerusalem was the capital of Judea, the southern kingdom, and Samaria was the capital of Israel, the northern kingdom. And it was that way all in the Old Testament until Israel was carried away captive by the Assyrians somewhere around 721 BC. And then Judea continued to live and was still alive when Jesus Christ was on earth. So however you want to frame it, that's the history concerning Israel as opposed to Judea. Appreciate the call, Eric. Let me let you go. And let's go now to Dan. Dan is calling from Massachusetts. Hello, Dan. What's on your mind?
Hi, Pastor Irvin Baxter. We're currently studying the book of Revelation in my Bible study class, and I am trying to, probably not too well, give them your interpretation. And the question I'm getting was, we're on the 7 seals right now, and we're trying to figure out how the trumpets and the seals overlap if the trumpets aren't presented until the 7th seal. Like I already mentioned to them that you said, in your opinion, 5 of the 7 trumpets are already sounded, but they're trying to grasp that if the trumpets aren't open until the 7th seal, how could 5 of the 7 have already sounded?
Well, that's a wonderful question, Dan. It's very important. We have to realize that the book of Revelation is not in chronological order. It is in an order, but not in chronological order. The 7 seals end up in Revelation chapter number 8, verse number 5. The 7 trumpets start sounding after that. However, that does not mean that at the 7th seal is the rapture of the church, the second coming of Jesus Christ. But then we start over. So you have the 7 seals ending at the 7th seal. Then you start over with the 7 trumpets ending with the 7th trumpet. And the 7th seal and the 7th trumpet are the same thing. So the 7 trumpets are not contained in the 7th seal. It's just starting a new sequence. There are 4 accounts of the second coming in the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 8, verse number 5, that's the 7th seal. Revelation chapter 11, verse number 19, or verse 15 through 19, that's the 7th trumpet. Revelation chapter 14, verse 14 through 20, that's the 2 harvests. And then finally you get to the 7th vial, and you again have the second coming. So there are 4 accounts of the second coming, and these counts do not run one after the other, but merely you have the 7 seals, then you start over and have a different viewpoint of all the events leading up to the 7 trumpets and the 7th trumpet, the second coming. Then you start over again and you have a whole nother story telling the second coming from a different angle in verses chapter 12 through chapter 14. Then you start over again, chapter 15 through 19, and you tell the story all over again. Every single one of those sequences ends with the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan. And you know, until we understand that, we really cannot understand the order of Revelation. Once you realize 7th seal, 7th trumpet, 7th vial, same thing. There were voices, thunderings, earthquake, great hail. You hear that phrase every time there.
We live in critical times. If the final 7 years started today, would you know what to do? God's people need to understand the prophecies that are taking place. Daniel 11:33 says, "And they that understand among the people shall instruct many." To guide the people around us, we must first receive instruction ourselves on the biblical prophecies of the end time. End Time Ministries is introducing the End Time 1000. We have created Jerusalem Prophecy College online to help you be ready to inform those around you. The goal is to have at least 1,000 people prepared to instruct others. By joining the End Time 1000, you can fulfill Daniel 11:33. Sign up for Jerusalem Prophecy College online and be equipped to guide your friends and loved ones during the final 7 years. Go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com. That's JerusalemProphecyCollege.com.
Oh, by the way, since we launched the End Time 1000, we've actually had 1,600 sign up for it. However, remember, the goal is to finish it, because that's what will equip you to be among those that understand among the people and instruct many. So we're in that era before the final 7 years begins, when we have to be preparing ourselves, because If we don't get ready now, we won't have time to get ready when the final 7 years begins. Once they sign the Middle East peace agreement, it is going to be absolutely critical that we be ready at that moment. So right now, we're like Noah building on the ark, preparing for the flood. If he would have waited to start working on the ark until it began to rain, he would have drowned. But he obeyed God's voice, he got the ark prepared, and he and his household were saved as a result. Well, that's where we are. So if you have already enrolled in the Jerusalem Prophecy College, I urge you, stay with it. We've already had, I think, 10 to 12 people complete the entire course. Congratulations to all of you. Others of you are getting close to completion. However, the vast majority is still in the early stages since we only launched this within the last few months. So all of you that have started, don't be weary in well-doing. Keep going. Set aside a specific time, either every day or every week, and keep going, because it's that faithfulness. And don't miss a week. You know, if you only do an hour a week, say every Saturday morning, you say, first thing I get up, I'm going to do my Jerusalem Prophecy College. Get through it, because this is the material you're going to need. I believe with all my heart that God spoke to me in a dream. And I don't say that lightly, because I've probably had no more than 10 dreams that I knew were from God in my 50-some years of ministry. So I'm not saying that lightly. But about 6 months ago, I believe God spoke to me in a dream to launch the End Time 1000. Many of you have already signed up. Now, if you have not done it yet, I urge you to jump on board as well, because if we had 2,000 or 5,000 or 100,000, it would not be too many. We're going to have 7 billion people to minister to when this final 7 years hits. It's going to be a time of tremendous conflict, but also a time of tremendous revival. We want you to be a part of the revival, but you can't do it if you don't know what you're doing. The Bible says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So if you haven't yet joined, simply go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com, register, and then enroll in your first class. Now, I want to make sure you understand there is a very small charge to go through these courses. It's so small, it's almost embarrassing, to tell you the truth. I mean, most colleges would charge you thousands of dollars per semester. We only charge enough to maintain the college, $50 per semester. So if it takes you 3 months, it would be $50 every 3 months, $50 per semester, depending on how fast you move. So it's totally reasonable. We spend $50. Sometimes you go out to eat one meal. So it's totally reasonable. Simply go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com, register, and then enroll in your first course. Get started. We're receiving glowing reports from how blessed people are being through the Jerusalem Prophecy College. We got to get ready. And I want to have at least 1,000, but we really need many more than that. Because how in the world do you minister to 7.5 billion people with a mere 1,000? Now, that's a whole lot better than zero, obviously. So God's going to use you, but he can't do it unless you prepare yourselves, you equip yourselves. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Let's get back to the phones now. Pamela is calling from Tennessee. Hello, Pamela.
Hi, good afternoon, Reverend Baxter. Wanted to mention, don't know if your son-in-law may have mentioned it, missed one of his podcasts, that was announced about 4 days ago that President Trump is going to introduce the peace agreement plan June 15th to June 30th. And as well, in the peace agreement, he's going to, the proposed plan, he has the neighborhood in East Jerusalem called Abu Dis, ABU, and then capital DIS, 2 separate words. It will be the capital of the Palestinian state. It's in his proposed peace plan. And that they thought that Netanyahu knew about this. That was and by the way, that was May 21st, and it's still on today on watch.org. Do you know anything about the Abu Dis neighborhood in East Jerusalem?
Yeah, I do. I've been there. I went there several years ago because back then they were talking about making that their capital, and they actually built a parliament building, a huge building of over I'm trying to remember now. It was well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell you how big it was, but it was a very, very large building designed to house the government of the Palestinians. Well, now that they have said repeatedly that they must have East Jerusalem as their capital, they've backed off of that. Apparently, President Trump, together with Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt, they have revived that idea of making that the headquarters for the new Palestinian state. It is about 0.6 of a mile from the Temple Mount. So it's just over the Mount of Olives, just on the other side of Bethany. So it's very close to the Temple Mount, but it's just on the other side of the border wall that Israel constructed to keep terrorists from coming into Israel and committing terrorist acts. So yes, I'm very familiar with it, and I don't know, of course, the Palestinians don't want to accept it. Nevertheless, we don't know what's going to happen. I would caution you, Pamela, with this. Even though some of the articles are saying that Trump is going to release his peace plan in the next month or so, I would not take that to the bank yet, because Mr. David Friedman, our ambassador to Israel, said it might be 3 or 4 months from now. So They have not yet really decided a firm date for establishing the peace agreement. So we'll just have to wait and see when that happens.
Okay, and by the way, Dr. Michael Savage has a transcribed review of the former Prime Minister of Israel, let's see, his last name is Barak, Mr. Barak, and he's got it transcribed on his website, drmichaelsavage.com, and why he thinks a two-state solution could work in between the Palestinians and Israelis, and that's on his website this week, he said. His accent was difficult to discern last Friday, so he had the entire interview transcribed and put back on his website so that callers can call and listen to this interview he did on Friday. He said it's the most important interview he's ever done on his radio talk show, and he is a former prime minister there, and he knows a lot about his book, My Life, My Country, is what he was interviewing him for, and he thinks this peace agreement could work in the two-state solution. But I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pamela. And Ehud Barak was the prime minister of Israel in the year 2000. He met with Yasser Arafat at Camp David with Bill Clinton for 2 weeks. And Barak actually offered to give away the whole farm. He was willing to actually give away the total Temple Mount. Ehud Barak is a very left-leaning liberal. He has attempted to come back and become the prime minister of Israel again. However, he's too liberal even for the Jewish people, and so he has not been able to get any traction to revive his political career. But now then, he's written this book. Whether he's written the book as a possible forerunner of trying one more time to reestablish himself in the political process, I do not know. You may be interested in knowing that Ehud Barak was the officer over Benjamin Netanyahu when they both were in the Israeli Defense Forces. Barak was Netanyahu's superior at that particular time. So it's very interesting as you see what's going on. But Barak is saying that he's willing for a two-state solution, and he was always in favor of the two-state solution. But the Israeli people rejected what he was willing to do. He was willing to give away the Temple Mount permanently. And that's when Ariel Sharon came to power. He ran against Ehud Barak. He went up on the Temple Mount and said, we will never give away the Temple Mount. And the Israeli people rallied around him and voted Barak out and voted Ariel Sharon in. So that's a little bit of the history of what has happened as far as Ehud Barak goes. Well, there is so much happening, and it's so interesting when we see it all happening. I wish I could go back to Abu Dis, and perhaps we can do that at some future time, but it's not very far from the Temple Mount. I believe I read today that it's 0.6 of a mile from the Temple Mount itself, so it's going to be very, very close. Now, what does the Bible say is going to happen? The Bible says there's going to be a peace agreement. Does it predict a two-state solution? Yes, it does. It predicts that the area of Judea is going to be under Palestinian control. It also states that Jews living where the Palestinian state will be established, that those Jews will be allowed to stay there living as a Jewish minority under the Palestinian state. We know that because Jesus said halfway into the 7 years that the Jews living in Judea would have to run for their lives because suddenly the Palestinians are going to turn on them and begin to slaughter them. So from that we know that the Palestinians will be in charge in the area called the West Bank or Judea. We also know that everyone will have access to the Temple Mount. So somehow, if they do make the capital of the Palestinians Abu Dis, and if they do, that will probably be temporary because the Palestinians will not accept a permanent capital in Abu Dis. But if they do make that their temporary capital, they'll probably provide a way for them to come to the Temple Mount and to worship there so that Jews, Muslims, everyone will worship there. We know that because Revelation chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, John was told to measure the temple and those that worship in the temple, and this happens halfway through the final 7 years. But don't measure the outer court of the temple because that's going to be trodden down the Gentiles. It paints a picture of Jews and Gentiles worshiping side by side on the Temple Mount halfway through the final 7 years. Those conditions will have been part of the peace agreement that President Trump is trying to promote right now. I don't know whether Trump's plan will prevail or whether someone else will sponsor a treaty. I don't know the answer to that, but there is going to be a peace agreement, and when it is signed, it will launch the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not telling you these things might happen. I am telling you they are absolutely going to happen. It's all very clearly depicted in your Bible, and it's so important that we realize. So when it happens, what about you and me? What are we going to be doing? Well, the Bible teaches during this final 7 years, there's going to be great revival. In Revelation chapter number 7, verse 9 through 14, it says, I saw a great multitude out of every kindred, every people, every nation, every tongue, a great multitude that no man can number. And it says there, these are they that come out of great tribulation. They've washed their robes. They've made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So this paints a picture of a great revival. Now, who's going to be preaching for that revival? Who's going to be helping people to come in to the fold, into the Church of Jesus Christ? It's going to be you. It's going to be me. In order for you and me to qualify, I urge you, become a part of the Jerusalem Prophecy College. If you don't want to do the college, then at least get the 14-lesson series called Understand the End Time, because we've got to get ourselves ready. When you realize that President Trump says that he's going to release his plan maybe as early as the last part of June, and when you realize that Israel is secretly negotiating with Hamas right now, these things can develop quick. And so it's very important for all of us. So how do you get the Understand the End Time series? Call us, 1-800-END-TIME, or you can order the Understand the End Time series at endtime.com. How do you enroll in the Jerusalem Prophecy College? Simply go to jerusalemprophecycollege.com, register, and then enroll in your first course and get going. Some people blow through a lesson every day. You can do that if you want to, but whatever you do, learn the material as you go, because God's counting on you. God's counting on me. They that understand among the people shall instruct many. 800-END-TIME.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of End Time Ministries.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.